I'm Jessica Hayes. I'm a psychotherapist specialising in perinatal mental health and OCD. And I also have an autistic 6-year-old who struggles with intrusive thoughts. So a lot of the work I do is very neuroaffirming and focused on obsessive compulsive disorder.
And I'm Laura Mole. I'm a therapist from London. I work with teenagers and adults with OCD, and I have lived experience with OCD.
So today we're talking about OCD and how to find good therapy and things to look out for that's maybe not so helpful when helping OCD. So hopefully give you some tips about what to look for and what not to. This is just our experiences and our opinions based on what we've noticed working with this for a while. So there are going to be other approaches that we don't know too much about that might also be helpful as well.
Yeah, everything we talk about is evidence-based. I had OCD from a very young age. We didn't know it was that. I was just known as a worrier. And I would go into my mum just hundreds of times, just asking for reassurance about things, things like I have a lump on in my face, and I was convinced I was going to die of cancer. And I had a cousin who got married, and I said a rude joke to her. I was like 8 years old, and I thought I'd ruined her life, or random things like this. Anyway, in my early 20s, it kind of came to a head, and I went to go and find some help. And this wonderful therapist called Alice was like, I can't necessarily diagnose you, but here's a sheet. Does this sound familiar? And it was on Puro, and it was just me to a T. And then kind of ensued the search for help, as it were. Finding a therapist who knows what they're talking about with OCD is really tricky, isn't it?
Yeah. And it sounds like yours was quite a few themes as well, which might have thrown people off, because I think there's a common misconception that it must be hand washing, or it must be that you're worried about contamination, or you must be really, really neat and organised, and therefore it can't be OCD if not.
Yeah, I definitely didn't have the neat and tidy and the cleaning ones. Right? I rang so many therapists and said, I'm pretty sure it's OCD. I know it's OCD. I need some help. I need some specific OCD therapy. I've had therapists say to me, I don't think it sounds like OCD, again, because the hand washing thing. Mm-hmm. You're like, right, okay.
You're not clean enough for that.
And you've said on your website that you're an OCD specialist.
Yeah.
Or, I rang someone and they said, well, actually, I don't think that OCD exists, which is hard to hear when you're kind of desperate for some therapy and looking for some help. So, yeah, I know how hard that journey is for people,
It sounds like you actually felt really lucky with the first person.
Amazing.
Being able to say, here's a list, here's OCD.
Yeah.
Because I find that a lot of people, because I do brief introduction calls where people get 15 minutes and scope out if I can help them or not before they commit to any sort of therapy. And people get so much from just the calls sometimes, just going, can you just tell me if this sounds like that? And it's like oh, thank goodness it's that. When I actually go, oh yeah, no, it sounds quite similar to a lot of things I've been working for. And I think I was speaking to someone the other day, one of my supervisees, about how actually therapy for OCD starts in understanding what OCD is. That can give so much, reduce so much shame and stigma, and can be a big part of the work, which is quite different from quite a lot of other things. But then you then got the negative experiences after the good one, it sounds like.
Yeah, but it's so true. It's like, you get an inquiry call and it's like, oh, right, you actually get this, and there's that kind of like connection of when you know OCD really well, whether you're an OCD therapist who's worked with it so much or whether you've had lived experience, that connection that you have with somebody when you go, yeah, and this, and they're like, yes, that's it. That's exactly what I'm talking about, where they might have had a journey of, 5-6 years of trying to find the right help, or, I feel this certain way and I don't know what it is, and nobody can really tell me.
It's hard because quite a lot of courses, I don't know if your background therapy course did this, but as a CBT therapist, we get taught about different protocols for different things when we're doing our full training. There is actually an OCD lecture, but it took working with OCD for the first time to realise how little I understood. So I think one of the things we've talked about quite a lot is that there's an unconscious incompetence sometimes with therapists who think that they'd be able to treat it because they don't understand all the mechanisms behind it. Because on the surface, I can do some exposure work, I know how to do that, I can do that with other things. But actually, until you understand it, break it down how OCD works and how that thing's unhelpful and that's not, you don't know what you don't know. So it's not the fault of the therapist say that they don't realise that it is something that you need extra training and experience in, I guess.
Yeah. And actually, the way that kind of it worked for me was, yes, having OCD led me to become a therapist because I wanted to help people feel better, but I didn't go into the OCD field for, I I qualified in 2017, and I didn't start working with OCD till many, many years later, because I wanted to kind of keep away from it in a way, because I didn't want to do the wrong thing, you know.
How very OCD.
All right, a little bit. Until I kind of knew what I was really doing because of the experiences that I'd had, and it's, you know, it can be really disheartening at best and harmful at worst.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I work with a lot are intrusive, sexually inappropriate thoughts about children and family members and things like that.
Yeah.
And I have people literally coming from a psychiatrist going, they told me OCD doesn't exist, so what does that make me? Yeah. Which just then sends them into a panic, because they just think they've, you know, oh, maybe it is OCD, maybe it's not. And as you know, most of the time they doubt it might not be, you know, what if it is actually real and it's not OCD?
Yeah.
So to have someone as a professional go, that's not a thing, is going to send a panic, because obviously one of the compulsions that's quite common is to constantly go over OCD podcasts and OCD information to check it definitely fits with what you're experiencing. So I think it can be quite harmful doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, you go to a therapist and you think, yeah, they're going to call the police on me if I tell them really what's going on. You know, the stats are something like it's 1 to 2% of the world's population have OCD. I think that percentage must be a lot higher because of taboo thoughts and themes. You're not necessarily going to go to the doctor going, you know, I have really bad distress and anxiety over this because I think that I might be, you know, some sexual deviant or, you know, something like that. So actually we might be, it might be a lot higher than we think.
Yeah, and it comes from, there's a massive overlap, isn't there, between kind of neurodivergence and OCD as well. And I think there's some research coming out at the minute that they think that OCD might be another form of neurodivergence rather than kind of actual mental health problem. Or kind of when it's not as acute, it being more of a neurodivergent because of the way kind of the brain scans indicate the brain works. And then you get complicating factors like that, like, oh, well, they always like routines and rigid thinking and stuff like that, and it then gets missed, and it gets assigned away as, well, that's just their autism or their ADHD. That's a hyperfixation for the ADHD, and that's all, when actually it's all of it combined, and it's very common to have them complicating each other, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, as I said, I've worked with the perinatal industry, well, perinatal people as well. Intrusive thoughts about children, intrusive thoughts about your child, sexual ones or harm ones. I don't know many people that go to the midwife and go, hey, I've had this thought that this is what I want to do to my baby. What does that mean? Because you also hear that some NHS trusts haven't caught up with OCD when it comes to their safeguarding policies, so they can get it reinforced because they get safeguarded and they get social services involved, which thankfully seems to be changing a lot now. And I think more midwives getting upskilled to notice OCD symptoms and know, and having a different protocol to follow to go down, it's really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely, and essential, I'd say.
There was some training by Paul Salkowski, who is really great at doing OCD training, and he works with the NHS a lot, and I think he's getting a lot of the procedures changed. So I get why people are wary, but actually it's seeming like it's more common now that people are going to not panic when they tell them these thoughts, even if they're not OCD specialists.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just need to talk about it a lot more, I think.
We do.
So what do you think are good tips to look for when someone says they are an OCD specialist? What would your advice be as someone who's been through both sides of things?
Yeah, both sides. So I would be looking for buzzwords like exposure response prevention, acceptance and commitment therapy, and maybe ICBT as well, because they're the, you know, we know they're the research-based treatments at the moment. I would be wary of somebody who says that they do CBT for OCD, and if they start talking about thought logging or putting thoughts on trial, steer away from that a little bit, because, you know, we're not trying to engage with the thoughts. We're just going to let them be there with OCD therapy.
Because some people treat it, again, because they're not got the understanding of OCD. Within CBT, the thoughts on trial and the logging and things like that are really common ways that people work with anxiety. So if they've missed the OCD element or they don't understand the OCD element, completely agree. We don't want to put thoughts on trial. We don't want to engage with them. So I'd make sure, if you are going for CBT, that they focus on the behaviour stuff, which is the ERP stuff, but they'd also focus on, you know me, I challenge some of the longer term factors as well. So as well as the ERP, I work cognitively, but I don't engage with the thoughts. I engage with the things that make those beliefs about the thoughts. So things like, you know, not being able to tolerate uncertainty, the perfectionism, the feeling like a bad person, all these kind of things. So making sure that they're targeting the right things. But I think my advice would be more to chat with the therapist, because I think I've spoke to loads of people who, after a call, they're like, it felt like you got it. And they've spoke to people before and they've not felt like that, and they kind of know it's a bit too jargony. So I think what people don't realise, especially if they get to go private when they're looking for a therapist, is make sure that they talk to them and have that, whatever they offer, 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever, call first, to make sure that the therapist proves that they understand how OCD works. And you'll know when you get the right one, or one that's at least a good start, not the best one or the right one. I'm not looking for perfect, but I think you get that sense by just talking about how they understand OCD and make sure it fits with you. I don't know much about some of the other modalities and how that works, like person-centered approach and things like that. I've only heard kind of the negatives of when that's been more harmful, but I also don't know what a person-centered approach would suggest for OCD. So I'd be careful and mindful that they don't explore things like, if you have an intrusive thought, for example, about your sexuality, not taking the approach of, well, let's explore that part of you that might be questioning that, because obviously we know about OCD, it's all about obsessional doubt, and the more you engage with it, the more it's going to get worse.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point, because I'm from an integrative therapist background. So for people who are listening, that means that I work with lots of different modalities altogether. So then I've trained in ERP as kind of an add-on to that. And so they would go into the thoughts of, well, why do you think that you are a paedophile? Or why do you think that you might want to kill your family? And that could be, one, it's going to be really distressing, and two, it's not going to help. If you're stuck on your modality and you kind of like go gung-ho for it, rather than being really open and curious about, okay, so this feels like something else, let me have a look into it. I've also kind of heard from other therapists as well about how, because therapists, generally we care, right? We care about people that we see. We want them to be happy and get better. You know, I've spoken to therapists who have had people who go to them who've got OCD, and they've kind of come to me and said, you know, well, how can I deal with this, you know, without sending them away, but holding it, but then kind of signposting them if they want ERP or something. And that's absolutely fine, I think. Because if you've got a great relationship with your therapist, as long as it's not kind of always reassurance seeking and reassurance getting, then there are ways to kind of hold your OCD until you can get the treatment that will help.
I think the difference there, though, is that the therapist has gone, I don't know enough about this, I'm going to ask about it, I'm going to get some specific supervision, I'm going to upskill, and I am not in a position until I've done all those things to help with OCD. One of the things I recommend for a lot of people, therapist-wise, who come to me and say, oh, I want to work with OCD, what do you think, is don't work with that one unless it's, like you said, as like a holding pattern. Go and do some more research into it and go and upskill in that, and that's fantastic. You know, I'll help you, we'll kind of learn really about OCD, but do that away from clients and then come back when you're in a space where you understand it better. Unless, like you said, they're like, well, we're going to do a piece of work on, let's say, trauma, because we know that trauma can have a big impact on OCD sometimes. Like, I'm going to do this trauma work, but I don't know enough about OCD to make sure that we're not making that worse. So could you give me some guidance for this client, and then after this I'll go and maybe look into OCD more. And I think that's fantastic on the therapist perspective.
Having that humility and reflection as well is so important. There'll be a lot of people who go to a therapist for anxiety or sort of general depression and things like that come up with OCD, and they'll be working with them for a while, and then if the therapist is getting that sense of, hang on, this doesn't feel quite like, you know, this feels a little bit more than, it's at that point for them to go, hang on, let me reflect. It's okay that I might not know this, and it's okay for me to hold this client whilst I go and do more or refer.
But I think it's important to keep in mind that you're not a patient who's getting help and you just have to get what you're given. Like, if you think that the therapist does not understand OCD enough, or that they're not doing a modality that works for you, or that you just need something else, like, it's your care. Like, you can advocate for yourself, which I think is missing a lot with OCD clients, because, as you know, one thing that OCD does is it erodes your entire trust in yourself. So you don't trust your thoughts, you don't trust your judgments, you don't trust your senses, like you don't even trust that you've just seen that thing's unplugged, right? Like, you don't trust anything. So to then go to have to advocate for yourself. So I think it's important that loved ones around the person with OCD help them to advocate. And if you're talking to them and you're saying, well, do you think the therapy's helping, and they're saying no, it's making it worse, help them go and advocate for themselves and say, you know, well, we can try a different therapist. And if you can go privately, which is not everyone can do because it is a very privileged position to be in, you are employing someone to help you. You can try one and sack them off and try another one until you get the right fit, and you're interviewing them on the call. You don't just take whoever seems to be okay, they're reasonably okay. If you're paying for it, get what you need out of it, you know.
And if they're a good therapist, they'll like the feedback. Like, I like it when people say, actually, I didn't like it when you said this, blah, 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 because that gives you the chance to then, you know, kind of, I don't know, it makes the bond stronger sometimes if they want to stay, and if they don't want to stay, then it helps you learn as a therapist. It's all about staying open, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think I get a lot of inquiries from people who are supporting someone with OCD as well, looking at, well, how do I help the person with OCD? And I think that's one of the first things to do, help them to find help and be their judgment alongside them, because I think one of the things that's really helpful in therapy for OCD anyway is that they can trust you enough that they go, okay, I can't trust my own judgment about this right now. I'm going to give that to you. You tell me if I'm okay with just functioning like this, and then at the end of it, I'm going to take that back and I'm going to start to trust myself again. And you have to sort of build that back up. So I think that's why it's important to have that really good relationship with them at the start, because, you know, if you can't trust me, then you're not going to be able to do all the things that I'm asking you to engage with, right? So being that person for them while they're trying to find the right help is big. OCD UK is really good for, I think they've got resources specifically for loved ones of people with OCD.
Yeah, they do. And they've also got a great referrals page as well. So you can have self-referrals to the NHS, and it might be a bit of a long path, but I think it's worth doing. And they've also got great resources on medication. So we know from the research that combination of medication and therapy are really great for OCD. So if you're wondering about medication, and there's lots of stigma still around taking tablets and stuff, but there shouldn't be. OCD UK is kind of like, these are the ones that, you know, your doctors and your psychiatrists should probably be prescribing, because these are the ones we know that are super effective.
I think because obviously with the perinatal clients I get, there's a big worry about taking them in pregnancy as well, and breastfeeding and things like that. And if you go through the perinatal mental health team, they are much more informed about which things are safe and which things are not. And equally, there's the breastfeeding, the National Breastfeeding Network can also help you understand any interactions and things. But I think people are reluctant to take medication, one, because of, obviously with OCD you can focus on what side effects you might get, but also thinking that it's like, oh, if I take it, I'm going to rely on it. Whereas actually, if you're so distressed that you can't engage with the ERP, you're not going to be able to do it anyway. So taking it temporarily to be like, oh, well, take the edge off the anxiety enough that I can change all these behaviours that I know make the OCD worse, can be really good for like a short-term use as well.
Yeah, it's just a tool in the toolbox, isn't it?
When you are scoping out therapists and things like that, ask them about their opinions on things like this as well, because I think that will make it very obvious who's got your way of thinking and your values when you're working with them as well. Because if someone says to me, oh, I don't know whether I should take therapy or medication or whatever, then we have a conversation about it and we plan for it in our treatment. Like some people literally say to me, I'd like to be off my medication by then, and we talk about, well, what would you need to get to be able to do that? And if you try and you still need it, are we okay with that? And kind of planning for that as well. I think it's just finding someone who fits with you as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And somebody who's willing to work collaboratively and not just, this is my way and this is what we're doing.
Yeah, which I think can be hard, because I think sometimes you get people coming to you who are so distressed that they want to be told what to do.
Yeah.
Like, just help me and tell me.
Yeah.
But actually you get a lot more progress when the person makes those decisions.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a little bit perhaps at the beginning when we have to be a little bit more holding in terms of, okay, well, how about we start here? And then we can go from there.
Yeah.
But again, it's about that building up sense of self, isn't it, with OCD? Because OCD is taking it all away. Self-esteem, you know, the paranoia that comes with OCD as well. So when you first go into therapy, there's a lot of that kind of stabilising, I suppose.
Yeah, and re-engaging with the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's a concept taken from ACT therapy, this idea of using values-based exposures, which I do quite a lot, especially with people whose OCD is stopping them from doing things that they want to do, because it reinforces it, doesn't it? Well, I can't take my child to soft play because of my OCD, so then I'm a terrible mum. Yep. And therefore the OCD thoughts are going to stick more, and it kind of reinforces like that. So picking exposures that aren't necessarily in a hierarchy, they're more of a, well, what things can we do this week that will make a difference to how you feel about yourself, about your parenting, or about your ability to do your job or whatever. Let's pick that to challenge, and that helps that sense of self build straight back up again.
Absolutely. It's so powerful as a motivator, isn't it? What is it that you would be doing if you didn't have OCD? What would you want to be doing right now? Let's go do that.
Sometimes OCD can get to the point where people are just isolated in the house with no one around, and then the thoughts get louder because they're just in the house with no one around. And then people criticize themselves because they're not re-engaging. Like, they're not like, well, I can't distract myself from my thoughts. And it's like, well, you've got nothing in your life distracting you, right? Like, if you're just sat there all day, of course you're not going to be able to let the thoughts quieten and do something, because you're not doing other things as well. So I think people underestimate those elements and try and focus straight on the hierarchy of exposure as well, which doesn't work for everyone.
No. When you start working with a therapist, knowing what the expectations are, so laying out, like, there's going to be homework, it's not going to feel comfortable and kind of like fluffy, it's going to sometimes feel a bit icky, we're both going to be sat there doing exposures together that you will have chosen and designed, so it's, you know, it's your decision always, but it's not going to be a relaxing, kind of refreshing experience, certainly at the beginning, you know, maybe at the end, absolutely, and, you know, we're all going to celebrate together, you know, and that this idea of, you know, the progress that you make is going to have to be because you've done the exposures every day. If you wait between sessions to do your exposures, you're not going to make the progress, and it's going to be really demotivating for you.
I think one of the things I always say as well is that similar to like a spider phobia, right? Like, if you sometimes go and sit in a room next to a spider, but then other times run away from it, your threat response will stay in the mode of that's a threat. So if you do an exposure that's really good one day, and then you're like, oh, I'm not doing that again, I'm going to go back to the other behaviour for a while, your brain will go, well, that's clearly still a threat then, I'm not downgrading that. And having to get through that consistency and not jumping right up here to, I'm going to do this really scary thing and then I'm going to completely backtrack next week, because that can be one of the things, you know, if you're worrying about, well, my therapy's not working enough, or I'm not making the progress I want, I could sometimes taking a step back and going, but what are you doing? What message are you actually sending back to the OCD? And I think that's why the first sessions I always do with people are understanding how your OCD works, what it's saying, what's keeping it going, what's reinforcing it, and what helps it. So then when we can look at, oh, okay, well, I'm not making this progress that I want to do, we can go, well, what are you telling your OCD that thoughts aren't scary, or are you actually acting as if they are? Or are you telling it that these things need to be challenged, or are you going back and doing all these things that aren't too helpful?
Exactly. The only way that we can teach the amygdala, the bit that's kind of controlling all of this, is by doing. It doesn't listen when we speak to it, right? So that's why talking therapy, traditional talking therapy, is not going to hit the sides with OCD.
One of my favourite metaphors that we've come up with recently is we've talked about OCD being like basically a cross between a narcissist and that racist uncle that you just can't talk to. Where you know, arguing with it, like if you argue with your racist uncle, you can give them all of this evidence, like this is the truth, I've got all this evidence, I can bring people in to prove that these people are, they're not going to listen. And the more you engage with them, actually, the more irate they get, right? And they start arguing more, and they get really emboldened and like passionate about it. But actually, if you just go, okay, Uncle Jeff, thank you for your opinion, and he's just blabbering away next to you, and you're just not engaging with him, but equally not ignoring him, because that would make him more annoyed. Because you can't convince someone who's so stuck in their ways or who's really narcissistic about your viewpoint. So treating OCD like that, getting that balance of not taking you on, but you can just do your thing in the background, can be quite helpful, which is why, like you said, the traditional talking therapies aren't as helpful, because you're engaging with Uncle Jeff, right?
Exactly.
You're trying to convince him, and that's why the evidence and the thoughts on trial and stuff don't work, because it doesn't matter what the trial, it's never successful with someone who's like that.
Exactly. Speaking of metaphors, have I told you about my David Bowie one?
Oh no.
Okay, so you know when you're doing ERP with someone, and they've got to kind of like pick a level to start with, right? Yes. Now with the ACT kind of the way of it doing sort of intentionally choosing something that is based on your values and the life that you want to live. Absolutely fantastic. I loved using that more and more, in fact. And if you go to kind of the more kind of traditional ERP with the hierarchy stuff, David Bowie comes in for me there, because what we know is unless you are really, really, really motivated to do a level 10 really scary one, white knuckling through a challenge isn't going to do you habituation at all. So what we like is kind of a level where you're nervous but excited for a challenge. You know, the little bit of uncomfortable. Would you agree with that? Or
Yeah, I think it's about your window of tolerance, isn't it? Keeping you within that, so you've got room to be pushed and get more anxiety temporarily, and it's not going to send you into full-blown panic mode.
Yeah, and that'll change every day. Like on different days you'll be able to do a different challenge. But David Bowie will help here, because he did this interview with a music somebody or other. I don't know. I'm going to paraphrase this, but it's online. You can see it. And this interviewer said, "So David, how over all these years have you maintained this amazing creativity, done things that nobody could ever imagine?" And he said, "Well, you know, you've got a swimming pool and you've got the shallow end and you've got the deep end." And he's like, "Yeah." And he said, "You know, in the shallow end, you can paddle about and you're all fine. You don't need to swim. But in the deep end, if you can't swim, you're flailing about and you're probably going to drown." He said, sort of, as you're creeping up to the deep end, there's this bit where you're kind of tiptoeing on the edge. And, you know, your nose is just kind of above the water and it feels a little bit, ooh. He said, that's creatively where he didn't go, ooh, by the way, in the interview.
I'm sad about that.
But he said, creatively, that's where I stay. Because I'm not in the shallow end kind of paddling, doing what everybody else is doing really safely. And I'm not in the deep end drowning, being this kind of thing that nobody's going to listen to, but I am on the risky ledge. And he said, that's where I stay, and that's where I've become so creative. And it is about staying on that ledge, that I'm uncomfortable, but I'm going to stay here until I feel more comfortable. Then I'm going to move to the ledge again.
I like that. I also think that, like I was saying about our relationship with our clients, like we have to be the safe space that sits at the ledge with them.
Yeah.
And if not, they're not going to feel able, like that nervous excitement's going to be terror, because it's like, I'm on my own.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure this out myself, which a lot of people do when they're really struggling with OCD, because they've not got the help they need yet. They don't feel like they can tell friends and family, or if they do, the friends and family do things that aren't necessarily the most helpful for the OCD.
Yeah.
Even though they're doing it to try and help their loved ones.
They're doing it out of love completely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But like, we as a therapist need to help them with that ledge so they feel safe enough to take risks, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is why I'm quite controversial in that I will reassure my clients at the start of therapy, because I feel like sometimes they need a bit of reassurance to get to the point where they're willing to take risks. So I'm not going to say to someone who comes to me for the first time and goes, I've got all these really scary, intrusive thoughts about children. Do you think I might be a paedophile? And I'll go, who knows?
Day one.
For the first few sessions, we'll talk about, no, this actually does fit with OCD.
Yeah.
You know, I'm pretty confident in this.
Yeah.
And that is reassurance. And I think I liked what you said earlier about it, you know, all the exposures and stuff being theirs, right? They're under their control. So it takes us to agree together. Yeah. I'm going to stop giving you that reassurance in sessions.
Yeah.
So at the end of the session, I'm no longer going to say, I'm not ringing the police after you leave, right? But that has to be a collaborative decision. I might suggest it, but then they have to wholeheartedly agree to it. And it is about fostering safety, isn't it? And helping them push themselves at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. What I say to clients is, I'm not going to reassure you, but I will assure you.
Yeah.
And if you need me to say it again and again, I can't get involved. I'll say something like, you know the answer to this one, but I'm here with you, and I know that it can feel hard not to hear that. So I think you can give reassurance in other ways as well. This is what I kind of talk to families about, is you can be reassuring without talking to OCD, saying, hey, you don't need to worry about that. It's fine. It's all fine.
Yeah, because being dismissive or overly reassuring can be scary in itself, right? And it can impact on the OCD. One thing I always say about anyone who's got anyone in their life with OCD is that, because I get people who flip from being overly reassuring to then reading something online and going, oh, we're not allowed to reassure.
Yeah.
And then just going, nope, can't do that every time they come, which causes a lot of distress. Yeah. So I would always reiterate, it has to come from them. And also to have a nice response. So rather than just go, no, I can't answer that, to have a way to say, you're asking for reassurance again. You've asked me not to do that. How about we go for a walk and talk about something else? And if you still need it later, we can go back to that.
Absolutely.
So having something that's still supportive,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of families will jump with any advice you give them. They just
Of
need
course.
to know which one to do.
Yeah.
And there has been kind of OCD programs and stuff, unfortunately, that I've had people who've gone to them with loved ones who've gone, under no circumstance do you give them reassurance from now, and they've like, it's the equivalent of flooding, which we know in general has been used in the past to conquer phobias. I don't know if you remember like Fear Factor, and they used to have like people confronting their worst fears, and the idea of you flood them full of room full of spiders, and then afterwards they'll be no longer scared of spiders. And they used to do it on like talk shows and things like that. We know that doesn't work in general, and it's really cruel. So we're not trying to flood them with the lack of reassurance. We're trying to go, okay, this is a decision we've made. How can we do this in a way that's still, like you said, assuring and reassuring, but not giving reassurance? Which is what we do in therapy anyway. The fact that we're still working with them on these thoughts is the reassurance, right? Like if I thought you were a paedophile, I would pretty much have acted on that, right? So the fact that I'm still working with you on this.
Yeah, there is a level of reassurance, isn't there, in the unspoken.
Yeah.
There's no way of kind of not doing that unless you're actively pretending to ring someone or anything.
Exactly. And one of the things I talk about as well is having to do this, like I said, in like a gradual way and with collaboration and kind of feeling like they're making these choices, which can be, that's just what we need, isn't it, to give that overall, okay, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Seems to be working.
I don't know about you, but I get super proud of people when they're facing their fears and when they've kind of reached their goals, like, and we're in it together. It really feels like we're in it together. It's such a lovely feeling. Yeah, there's nothing like it, I think.
Yeah. I sometimes like it when they come to session, like I was going to email you a confession, but then I stopped and I didn't.
Yeah.
And I've come and I've not even written it down, look, and it's like, great.
Yeah.
And you kind of buzz off them. I think OCD is really good to work with because it is very different. Even though you work with the same types of thoughts all the time, like the interactions and the kind of the wider story around it for everyone's very different. And everyone, you can't even predict when the bit where they suddenly start to go loads better is going to be. Like I said, sometimes you can literally do a few sessions of understanding the OCD and it's loads better, whereas sometimes it's really far along sort of exposures and things. But it depends on what their life's doing around that, I guess. Thinking about the ERP stuff, this word's thrown around a lot. Doing exposure in general, people, I mean, I think they classify as the gold standard and things like that. And there's quite a lot of people, I don't know about you, that I get who come to me and says, you know, I've tried ERP and it didn't work. And if that doesn't work, then what does that mean? This probably isn't OCD.
Yeah.
And I think what's important to do is before you engage with another therapy is to take a step back with someone who seems to know what they're talking about with OCD and go back over how you've done the ERP. So it's really helpful to talk to them about specific types of exposures you've done and why, because I think that tends to highlight when it's not been done in a helpful way, or it's been done in a way that technically okay, because it's still exposure and they're waiting for the kind of fear to come down, but it's not done in a way that's understood by someone who knows OCD. So things, for example, like we know in OCD that we don't want to monitor physical sensations or emotions when we respond to things, because that can impact the OCD, right? Because things like a groinal response, if you focus in on it, more likely to happen, and it's completely irrelevant to whatever you're watching. It's just that's a sensation that's happening. So I've had people who've come to me who've been told to watch something on the TV about harm or about kind of incest or about something that's key to their OCD fears, and to monitor how they feel as proof that they're not getting aroused or they're not getting excited by it, which then obviously goes against everything we know about what's helpful for OCD. Have you heard of any exposures that have on the surface sound like exposure therapy would be making sense, but actually it's done in a way that's not potentially helpful?
I think the ones that I hear more about are kind of like the really severe white knuckling through it, or a therapist kind of not explaining that it's exposure and then it's also the response prevention that's vital. It's not, you can't just expose yourself to loads of stuff and then wholeheartedly distract yourself with something else. You have to kind of, that's why the build-up is so important. So, you know, people will talk about kind of doing the exposures, but then not the response prevention part. And I think that it's really important that you're not just doing exposures for exposure's sake. It's about kind of really going, okay, so what, like you said before, why are we doing this? Why is this specific one? Is it motivation? Is, you know, based on my life goals, or is it because it's on my hierarchy and this is kind of like where I'm at right now and this is the next challenge? Not just, oh yeah, you're scared of spiders, and this is the thing, we're going to do this thing right now, or yeah, go lick a toilet seat. Well, why are we doing that? Well, so there's got to be a reason, and there's got to be the response prevention part of it.
I set up my exposure work quite differently to sort of traditional ERP anyway. Like I do more behavioural experiments, which is technically still doing the exposure, and you get the same effect of the anxiety eventually kind of comes up and then peaks and then comes back down on its own. But we do it as an experiment to test something out. So if my OCD says that if I don't do this compulsion, my anxiety is going to get higher and higher and higher until I have a panic attack, well, let's see if that actually happens then. And obviously I would never set it up where it's going to make them into a panic attack and not be able to cope. And doing things like, well, what happens if I don't explore those memories, right? Does that mean that I'm going to just keep dwelling on this until I kind of find out some horrendous thing about myself? Or actually, is that why I'm still focusing on these memories that I want to review? It's always kind of making sure that the exposure stuff, you know exactly why you're doing it. It makes sense to what you've already understood with your therapist about your OCD. Like, what is this message sending to your OCD? Is it a helpful one or not? And I think that in itself can help highlight when someone's doing it because they technically know that it needs to be exposure stuff versus a therapist who really understands the OCD. And I think you'll find, if you've had OCD therapy before, that if you flag up these things, like you talk about exactly what's happened, you talk to the new therapist about what you understand about OCD, what kind of work you've done on it before, what exposures you do, you'll tend to find a reason why it's not worked for you. And it might not be the therapist. It might be something like you were not in the part of your life where you could fully commit to doing the work, right? Like you've just had a baby and you didn't have the capacity to do anything about that, or you had a new job, or you had a new relationship and you just didn't have the time and space to commit to regular therapy or to do the work between sessions. Or it might be that the person's not as experienced and understanding about OCD, or it might be that because ERP is technically the gold standard in some ways, but there are so many ways to work with OCD, even within still into like CBT, like you mentioned ICBT before, which is a new type of thing that focuses on the cognitions and the beliefs behind the OCD and why your brain interprets that intrusive thought in that way. So not arguing with the thoughts, but okay, but your brain is saying that it's bad to have this thought. Why is it saying that? And looking at all those background reasoning and the irrelevant associations your brain makes to draw these conclusions from these thoughts. So there's quite a few different ways to do it, and it might just be that ERP doesn't work for you or your type of OCD.
Yeah, and also we've got to remember that OCD is so manipulative that it can convince you that your treatment isn't working even when it is working. Like, I mean, we've got to be careful saying that, because then you might be with a therapist thinking, oh, it's just my OCD saying this. But OCD, even when you're doing everything right, there will be those intrusive thoughts saying you're doing therapy wrong. It can really kind of try and hijack. And if you're not with somebody who is experienced at noticing that, a therapist who can be like, I can hear OCD trying to interrupt us right now and trying to kind of put a spanner in the works. It can get missed.
I guess everything, when it comes to OCD, rather than engaging with the thoughts, even with that, right? Like, I don't think the therapy's working. If you then take a step back and look at the behaviour, but what are you doing differently? How is your life looking now and compared to before? The evidence around you will show whether it's working or not, right?
Yes.
Whereas OCD wants you to make decisions based on those thoughts and feelings. It feels like I'm too distressed for this to be working. My thoughts are saying that this isn't working. Okay, but if we take a step back and again, we look at those goals and what we're trying to change, is that changing? And if the answer is yes, then it probably is the OCD that's saying that. Whereas if no, you're actually really not functioning, and then maybe you do need to discuss that with your therapist and with your loved ones to try and see whether this is the right fit. And I tend to find that there's also this phase that I'm getting quite a lot of inquiries about at the minute, like that people have done work on the OCD, but now their OCD is focusing on what if my OCD returns, which is like a secondary thing that comes in of like that was so distressing when it was bad that time. I really don't want that to happen again. So then when we take a step back and look at the behaviours, they're getting reassurance, they're checking things, they're researching online about what are signs that OCD is coming back, and they're avoiding things to not trigger thoughts. And it's about going, okay, this is just another OCD spiral, so we can do the same thing with this than we can do with other things. Well, that's very meta, is what one of my clients told me once.
It is.
And you can even do, so some people are using EMDR now for processing trauma that can impact on the OCD, but you tend to find that you can get EMDR specifically for memories of your mental health being in that state, which helps you then kind of get better from that spiral as well, which is found quite helpful.
Yeah, when you're in it, it feels like nothing else on earth.
If someone comes to you and says, I want my OCD to go away, I don't want to be anxious anymore, I don't want any intrusive thoughts, I want to return to my life pre-OCD and everything to feel normal again, what would you say?
Oh, okay, that's great. Well, I would say, are we looking at the previous life with rose-tinted spectacles? I wouldn't say that at first, but I'd say, you know, recovery looks different for everyone, but I can't guarantee that you'll never feel anxious again. Recovery doesn't look like I'm never going to feel anxious again, I'm never going to have an intrusive thought ever again. It's that you can live the life that you want to live and be happy and, you know, have had POCD and you can go on and have kids, or, you know, have had harm OCD and you work as a chef around loads of knives and stuff. You can go on and live the life that you want to live with a greater tolerance for distress and uncertainty. Yeah, it's not, you know, because, you know, 100% of people, whether they like to tell you the truth or not, will at some point in their lives feel anxious, but they don't have the experience of OCD for it to feel like, oh, this feels like OCD again. It's the same centres of the brain, isn't it? It's the amygdala letting out loads of adrenaline and cortisol. It feels the same.
Yeah.
Recovery is going to be that the intrusive thoughts are going to be quieter. They're going to be, you know, less frequent.
But still there.
But still there. Everybody
There's so much
them.
research that everyone has, and it's not just everyone has intrusive thoughts, everyone has the same content of intrusive thoughts as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Like everyone has the same content, but just are less tuned into it.
Exactly.
When they don't have OCD and don't really take them on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're still going to have them, and you still might sometimes get anxious when they come up because you've got the experience where your brain's gone, that was awful when we had these last time. So you are probably going to get a bit more distressed by them than other people.
Yeah.
But like you said, I mean, what does your recovery look like? Like how do intrusive thoughts affect you at the minute?
So because I've externalized my OCD into a caricature, it becomes a little bit funny because, you know, my OCD will say things to me. As in fact, so if I had never had OCD, this would just be intrusive thoughts. Apparently you have like 50,000 thoughts a day, one research study said. I mean, how did they count that? Right? But, you know, a lot of those are going to be intrusive, good, bad or ugly. But when they come in, I can shrug them off now, you know, and even if it's one of the subtypes that was the worst kind of subtype, it's like, oh yeah, no, that feels familiar. And it's not like a scary familiar because I've done the work around it and it doesn't give me that, uh-oh. It's like, oh yeah, all right then. And that's it. You know, when my resilience is a bit lower or I'm going through an anxious time, then it might feel a little bit stronger, but it's never going to take over to the point that it used to.
Your videos on that are fantastic, by the way. I love that you've got your puppet for your videos.
Doris. Thanks.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you think?
I think, like, you hit the nail on the head. It's about what you want your life to look like. What I would say is that I get people who think that they're going to have a complete personality shift. So I'm going to go from having a very, very busy brain that's anxious all the time to I'm going to be this really chilled out person who can be mindful, be really relaxed all the time, and I'm going to be this like really low key person. And OCD latches onto certain types of brains, right? Like in certain personality types. Yeah. We're not getting rid of that. We're getting rid of the excess bits that are unhelpful. So the reason why I brought up neurodivergence before is because, you know, if you've got like an ADHD brain or just a naturally busy brain, just because it's not filled with, I'm going to hyperfixate over this OCD theme and go to town on that, doesn't mean it's not going to do that for other things. It's just about learning how your brain works and what it needs and being nice to it and letting it fixate on nice things and helpful things and things that you're passionate about, rather than judging yourself for, my brains just won't slow down again. And I think a big part of the work I do with people are identifying what their brains need to function well and what their lifestyle needs to manage stress, because we know that OCD can be really impacted by not having any coping strategies to deal with just general emotions, not listening to your sensory needs and the needs of your brain and things like that. Part of the process is going to be, well, what does your life need to look like to fit with what your brain and personality type are like, rather than trying to aim for an unrealistic one.
Absolutely.
People get quite I think that in itself can build the self-esteem that, again, we know that low self-esteem can make OCD more likely to latch onto you. like building confidence in that, oh, this is just my brain, and there's actually really good parts about it, because the amount of people that I know who have a job that they wouldn't be able to do without their OCD brain, because that's how their brain works, and that's what that job suits them. Who can't parent in the same way, who can't have as good a relationships or as good a lifestyle without their OCD, or the elements that make them susceptible to OCD, right? So it's kind of getting confidence in that and embracing that, and not being scared that the OCD will come back, because if you've done therapy in a good way, you'll understand why the OCD came in, which bits are helpful and unhelpful, and you'll hopefully leave with confidence of, oh, I'm doing things well. I've also never ever met someone with OCD who was not a caring person.
Same.
And if you don't care, then you can easily dismiss intrusive thoughts about certain things. But if you're going to be a caring person, which I'm guessing you value, well, you're still going to unfortunately worry about other people and not want to hurt them and things. And that's not bad. That's actually really good. It's just when OCD's taking it from helpful to unhelpful, we're just trying to trim that bit down. So I always talk to people about realistically what do they want it to look like, and always talk about how we're never getting rid of intrusive thoughts, because they're supposed to be there, because ultimately intrusive thoughts are just unwanted thoughts that you do not choose to have, and they can be about all sorts of stuff, and sometimes that will be what motivates us to do things, and sometimes that's what distresses us, right?
Exactly. We've all had that one weird dodgy thought one time at some point, or several times in a lifetime. It's not new to you because you've got OCD.
And we're not going to get rid of that, because that's how we function. We're a giant information processor, and our brain makes really random observations and thoughts about all sorts of things. We can consciously choose to think about other things, but the random bits are going to pop in as well.
It's like that junk email account that everybody's got, where you subscribe to everything, and we're the spam filter. Do you know what I mean? So when you've gone through ERP, we're the ones who have to go, right, that thought is not important. That one's no, we can shrug that one off.
Absolutely. One of the so I've talked to you about this before, but I wrote a children's book that explains about unwanted thoughts and what to do when we get them, because my 6-year-old gets them. And all the books that I found were trying to get rid of them, to like bat off thoughts and make them go away, whereas I didn't like that as someone who works with OCD and knows that actually can be harmful if that's your expectation, because then as soon as they don't go away, it makes you more anxious. So focusing on, they're still going to be there. You just choose which ones to do something with, and leave the rest doing their own thing. So where do you think would be helpful to get advice and support if anyone is either struggling with OCD, or they've got family members who have got OCD, or they're professionals who want to know more about OCD?
So my favourites are the International OCD Foundation. They're great. OCD UK. I love them. There's OCD Stories for a podcast. Well, they're pretty good. Your stuff online. So Jess Helps Your OCD. My stuff.
Which is yours?
Mine is OCD Therapy Laura. And
I would say as well that I've got a bit on my website now that you can submit a one-off big email to get advice around any sort of mental health problems, or like a lot of people use it for advice around where to start looking for support, or how to support a loved one with OCD. So that's a new thing that I've introduced. Be mindful that you only get enough help and advice to understand what you're dealing with and where to get some support. It can often turn into a compulsion. So don't constantly consume content to do with OCD. If you know roughly what your OCD is doing, you know where you need to go to for support, and you know some ideas about how to deal with it, stop researching it. Because that in itself ends up becoming a compulsion. It makes the doubt about, well, what if this isn't OCD because I can't match a story exactly to what I experience, can have a massive impact. And it can also mean that your whole identity becomes your anxiety and your OCD, and you forget to put other things in your life. So make sure that you only look into these things enough to get support and to know what you're doing, and then try not to go back over it and over it and over it.
Yeah, that's so true. Else you'll get into a spiral of it. Absolutely.
Because it doesn't quite 100% fit with what I'm looking for, so maybe it isn't OCD.
Exactly, and because people have slightly different ways of working, your OCD will tell you, well, then that person wasn't right, so I have to discount all of that information, and I'm going to go to the next one and then the next one.
Just invest in the piece that you're doing, and be guided by the person you're working with of where to get some extra information, or whether you should be focusing on your general life and just doing the therapy, and then whatever it is you need to do between.
I think that's a really good tip, actually, is ask your therapist for recommended resources, and then just go with them whilst you're in therapy with them. so that you don't get confused about anything and you're not kind of endlessly searching online in between sessions.
Yeah, because that helps you, that introduces doubt into your therapy sessions anyway, without the logic. But also, as we've talked about quite a bit on this, there are different approaches to work with OCD, and they will counteract each other.
Yeah.
So go with one, see if that helps, and if it doesn't, then you've got another space to go to. If you try and, because I get people who get loads of self-help resources and they're trying all these methods, and then it means that they end up getting worse because they're not doing one thing, and
you haven't got time to do it all.
No.
Either, yeah.
One of the things, like we said before, is that a lot of it is an unconscious incompetence and unconsciously causing harm because you don't know enough about it. So even if you don't go for a full training, if everyone just gets enough knowledge that they know how to spot it, what makes it worse and what can help, then they can at least know where to keep their therapy to not do the bits that we've talked about that are unhelpful.
Yeah, and just be open to feedback, and if you want to go into it, then go into it. You know, it's doable.
We love pulling more people into our little cult of OCD focused therapists.
Yeah, come and join us.
But yeah, so well, I think that's everything.
Yeah.